Hi there, everybody. This is John Drew here from Elevated Planet, and I am here today with Ruah Bull. How are you doing, Ruah?
I'm good today. Very happy to be with you, John.
I'm delighted that we were able to arrange this because we're due another ramble, and I'm
Mhm.
excited about this. I always learn so much. I always learn so much during our rambles, and we're just uncovering various pieces of wisdom and thought-provoking. Because this is a very strange time that we're in right now,
Yeah,
right? This shift of the ages.
yeah.
This was what it is, right? And we're seeing all mayhem and various other things going on, all for a reason. And it's just kind of making sense of it and working out what do we do, right? It's an inside job, right? That's kind of a big part of it.
Hmm.
But prophecies, that I think is going to be one of our flavors of the day. Is that right?
Yeah, I thought that there have been a number of major prophecies that have not come true recently, and people have been like, "Oh my gosh, what does this mean?" So I thought we could talk a little bit about prophecy and how to relate to it, but also many people, including the Trappist monk that I trained with in centering prayer, Father Thomas Keating, have been saying in these last years that psychic abilities are really returning, that
Mm,
the sixth sense that was in many ways smothered during the
mm,
Enlightenment and made dangerous during the witch burnings and the Inquisition, that has started opening up for a lot of people. And so I wanted, and I know we wanted together to talk about how do we relate to these intuitions that we're getting? How do we respond to them? If they don't work out, what does that mean? So to just kind of open up a conversation back and forth. And when you said that thing about how you always learn a lot, I got this image of two squirrels, you and me, digging in the earth for a great acorn. So I guess it's a mutual pursuit of something juicy.
yeah, well, I always wondered whether my spirit animal was a squirrel, and we haven't established that yet. So
We'll do that next. The squirrel is great. I love squirrels.
my dog loves squirrels as well, but for all
I
the wrong
guess.
reasons. But yeah, no, this is really interesting because again, the returning of the psychic senses, the sixth senses, and all that sort of thing. Absolutely. And intuition is so important. I think this is just a really, really interesting sort of scope of topics here to discuss. Should we start with the prophecies?
Let's do that. So I'm just going to say some things, and as usual, please, jump in, your own perspectives, etc. So one of the things I actually wanted to mention, even though this is not something that our community is involved in, is there is a subgroup in very conservative Christianity that are really into the whole idea of the rapture. And this came in 1800s. A minister over here in the States developed this idea, and it's been really important for a lot of, I mean, I'm a Christ follower and I don't relate to it at all, but a lot of people do. Well, last year, I think first in September, and then when it didn't happen again, maybe early October, a South African minister predicted the rapture. And all these people, were on TikTok. There's, giving away their car, quitting their job, selling their home, donating their money, just getting rid of everything. One woman actually had a TikTok on dressing for the rapture because apparently when you rapture, all your clothes falls up and you go up naked to the sky or something. And she said, well, you don't want old underwear. It's like, you can't make this stuff up. And then other people were weeping because people they loved were not saved. So it was a big deal. Well, of course it didn't, I shouldn't say of course, it didn't happen. Then the guy said, oh, I used the wrong calendar. It was in October. They went through the whole thing again. It didn't happen. So you see some people going, this is like crazy. And I mean, they've destroyed their lives. They don't have a job, they don't have a home, they don't have a car. Um, and other people just bore down even more tightly. Well, that's because we were praying because we wanted more people to be able to be raptured. So that committed few uh, have not been impacted by the failure of the prophecy, but other people are like, what the heck? So I wanted to mention that because prophecy and how to respond to prophecy in a mature and not fundamentalist, black and white, literalist way is something that our community, I think, is being asked to really learn and grapple with right now, so we don't become like these folks who are caught in a story that has been destructive for a lot of people. And I know people in that community. I have friends whose family are in that, and I pray for them because there's a lot of suffering there. So there have been recent prophecies by people who are very well known. There's a manga artist over in Japan who her drawings actually turned out to be a lot of prophecies. Many of them have been absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
I think it was the end of last year. Remember, she said that Japan was going to fall into the ocean. People didn't, quit their visits, etc., and it didn't happen. I hadn't heard of this, but apparently in February, somebody told me there was a big prophecy about a massive earthquake in California and
That's
that
right.
San Francisco was going to disappear. And I have friends here who were calling family in, Sonoma County where I used to live, quick, get in your car and go to Nevada. And that didn't happen. So I think we just have to, something I just want to say up front, intuition, those sixth sense gifts are human. It's not God, it's my intuition. And two things. Rose Briere, she and Barbara Brennan were the two big names in the last century that really brought forward energy healing, psychic abilities, et cetera, here in the States. And my teacher trained with Rose Briere. And she used to say the best psychics on their best days are about 85% accurate, which is remarkable, but it's not 100%. And it's the best on the best days. The woman that I trained with, Lynn Breedlove, when I went to see her, John, part of what I loved about her is she would always say, I open to receive information, and I will do my best always to be as clear a channel as possible. But anything that comes to me comes through this vessel, and
Mm,
it's going to
mm,
be affected by me. So I'm going to tell you something, and then this is what I loved about her, you need to be inside and saying, does this resonate or not? And when I do tarot readings with people, I do it the same way as we did. What do you see in this card? What is here's the traditional reading. What resonates for you? So I think when we hear these prophecies, and I'll talk in a moment about our own intuitions, we need to hold it that this might very well be true, but it also might not be. And I
mm.
think if we can kind of hold it in that way, how do I want to relate to it? That'll keep us from freaking out, and can also keep us from tossing out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, Edgar Cayce made hundreds of prophecies. Many of them came true, and plenty of them didn't. But he was extraordinary because of how often he was spot on. So
Mhm.
I guess I would ask you, John, how do you relate to these big prophecies when you hear them? What do you do with them inside?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the ones that I studied in quite a bit of depth was the Nostradamus prophecies. Through mainly through Dolores Cannon's work. Okay,
Hmm.
because that's what made sense of it. Because we know that Nostradamus's work was all built into quatrains, which were
Right.
very difficult to decipher, deliberately so because of the Inquisition which was going on at the time. And
Yeah,
had they been able to understand exactly what he was saying, he wouldn't have lasted very long anyway.
that's right.
But through Dolores Cannon's quantum healing hypnosis technique, he was able to come through and explain his own quatrains. And it was amazing because one of the ones that really captured everybody's attention was the Twin Towers
Mm,
destruction and the
mm,
Pentagon
hmm.
that she had already predicted in a book that had been out some 10 years earlier. of course, nobody took it seriously until the fact that it actually happened. Now, to your point, Nostradamus, he did get a lot of things right. He got the First World War, he got the Second World War, he got Hitler, he got, you know, antichrists, right? But he did get other things wrong. But one of the things that he always said was that he could, when he was looking into his obsidian, black obsidian mirror, seeing the visions of what was coming. And I think it didn't make his life very easy because they
Mm.
didn't typically show him, you know, rainbows and unicorns, right? This was
Right,
all the bad stuff that could happen.
right.
But what he always said is that, you know, mankind has a choice. By my prophecies, it is a chance to change direction. It is a chance to be able to get out ahead of this and change everything. Because if we create our own reality, which I believe we do, and we have a heads up on something that could be relatively big, right? But there are ways in which we can actually overcome that, raising our frequency, you know, getting out there, you know, into the quantum wave structure and raising the frequency around the planet,
Hmm.
helping to bring in the things that are related to love, to joy, to
Hmm.
kindness, compassion, and all that kind of thing. Now, another example of this, and this actually goes out interestingly on our Sunday show this week. We got a piece of work here which is brilliant, but again, channeled. And the question was asked about the Hopi prophecy. Okay.
Hmm.
The Hopi prophecy, which kind of divides into two directions, and you've got
Right.
one which is destruction, 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 and then you've got this one over here where everything is wonderful. And it was asked whether that was, you know, was that going to come to pass? And what was said is that when the Hopis made that prophecy, it was a high probability,
Mm.
but things have changed.
Mm.
Things are now better than they were destined to be when they were looking at it from that point. So it wasn't that the Hopi prophecy was wrong, but we've now gone above that timeline. We're now on a higher trajectory. So, and the point was made. This is a reason that we, you know, when we hold prophecies, when we look at them, then we should hold them lightly, to your
Hmm.
point, right? Because it's not that what they saw was wrong, it was just that the world, the way it was going at that time, would bring that outcome. However, we can change our own destiny,
And change.
and therefore the outcome changes. Now, and one final thing I'll say on the prophecies as well, because the one you mentioned about San Francisco uh, disappearing into some sort of giant hole in the you know, like, and everybody was going to die, was basically what the prophecy was. And it was a lady, Kristen Holstead, I think her name is. She is very good. She channels Sophia, wisdom of the ages. Now, you know, when you listen to what is said, and actually what made it really interesting, the prophecy, when it was given by Sophia, and she was told to give this verbatim. She'd never done it before. She'd never done it where she'd given a very specific date, one day, one single day, in February, you know, 18th of February or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But that was when it was going to happen. And anybody who knew they didn't need to, you know, they weren't going to be there, they would move. If they were supposed to be there because it was part of their life plan. But what made it really interesting was that the way it was put was very compelling because it was saying, look, nobody ever really dies. We're all here for a purpose. We're all here. So it wasn't trying to scare people. You know, like, because you hear these ones and you think, this is just trying to create fear. And when you're just trying to create fear, I don't buy into that,
Yeah,
right?
same here. Yeah.
I think if there are things that you can predict in, but if you think, oh, right, okay, this is going to happen, you got to stay indoors for 3 days and you're not allowed to look out the window because if you do, you're going to die and all. No, no, I don't, you know, some people will buy into that. I don't. So I kind of look at the, what sits behind it from an energetic perspective.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
to your point, you know, this idea that on a good day you could be 85% right. I agree with that entirely because Again, I think it's really important. This sixth sense, psychic senses are returning, going back to our intuition. This is what we're coming back to. This is where we used to be. Because I think this is like from the heart, right?
Yeah.
That's where the intuition comes from.
Well,
That,
we were created to have six senses.
yes.
They're part of their, it's just that what happened in Western culture is that they started to be squashed. You know, that the dominant church didn't want other people to have insights and intuitions, you know, because they needed to be in charge, or the kings and queen, whatever. The people in charge didn't want that kind of freedom. But it's it's part of the makeup of being human that we are in the process of remembering what had been separated coming back again.
Mm,
And you know, I was thinking when you were talking about that how we can change things when you do the tarot, when you do like a Celtic cross, which is 10 cards. The first card on the top is what is trying to happen. What is spirit wanting? What is the circumstance and situation wanting to have come to fruition? The last card is if everything stays the same, what is the most likely outcome? And you always want to look at the relationship. Are they congruent or not? And if
mm,
they're not, you go back and look at the other cards and you see where is the blockage? What is interfering with what is trying to happen from being able to happen? And then you can actually start working with that card. You can start making some shifts
mm.
um, and come more into alignment with what is actually trying to happen. So we can intervene. We can make a difference. And also remember that, you know, human beings, we are wonderful, but we're not perfect. I mean, I've had psychics. I remember I went to a psychic one time, and thankfully I was able to drive back to where I work, where my Cherokee friend was waiting, and I walked in the door and she said, "Oh my God," she actually had to do a whole healing. The woman looked at me and she said, um, "Your father sexually abused you when you were a child, but you're never going to be able to remember it." And then later in the reading, she said, "You've got something wrong with your heart, and it can't be diagnosed by Western medicine, but that's how you'll die." Those felt like curses. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I used to teach classes on psychic etiquette, by the way, so we can do that someday too, as people are, in fact, maybe when we talk about your own visions, we can talk about how to be respectful of other people. I literally drove to my workplace where my friend was. She took one look at me, she got out her drum, her sage, and we had to get that stuff out of there. And thankfully, I knew I'm not sitting in the presence of God. I'm sitting in the presence of a woman, and she's gifted, but she's not perfect. So I didn't have to take that on. But I'll tell you, John, I did have to get that out of my system
I can imagine.
because it's, you know, you go sit with a psychic and you're open. And after that, I always remembered be open, but also have your white light around you.
Yeah,
I think I walked in
exactly.
too open. And you
Yeah.
know what? What came from that? I became somebody who worked with people who'd had terrible experiences with psychics. So that actually opened a part of my career because I knew what that was about and I knew how to help people who'd had that.
Mm,
So, again, if a psychic tells you something, go in and check in. Does this resonate for me? I had a psychic one time come up with an image that was very disturbing, and I could see it kind of freaked her out, and she didn't want to tell me what it was. And she said, like, you know, do you and your husband do some really like weird stuff together? And she gave me the image, and I totally realized that it was a blockage in our communication. Um,
right.
so she was just like, "Oh, are you guys like hurting animals or something?" And I'm like, "What?" She told me the image, and it's like, "Oh, it's how the flow of talking back and forth." So you listen. If you're in San Francisco and you're hearing it's going to fall into the ocean, I love what she said. If there's an impulse to go somewhere else, great. Otherwise, there's something about being here while this does or doesn't happen, that's part of your life, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, it's the psychic etiquette kind of thing. I mean, it's interesting. Anytime I've had psychic readings or anything like that over these last few years, I've never had anything negative at all. I've got to say that those who've done the reading, even if they did see anything that was negative, they didn't share it. Okay, but
Hmm.
because to your point, when they come out with something that is deeply negative, let's face it, it's very difficult. As you say, you've then got to cleanse yourself of that, right? Because the problem is that once it's in your mind
Yeah,
and you focus on it, what are you doing? You're drawing it towards you.
that's it. That's why it's like black magic. It's like
Yeah.
not okay.
No.
So a lot of the best psychics, again, they will say what Lynn would say, this is coming through me. And because I'm not a perfect pure channel, I'm a human being with, I clear out as much as I can, but I've got my own stuff, my own unconscious, my own lineage,
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that. See how it lands. But just a couple things with psychic etiquette. Even if you really think the lady standing next to you buying broccoli at Whole Foods has got an ovarian tumor, don't go over and tell her she has an ovarian tumor. It's like, it's you need to pay attention to, are you given permission? And even if you feel invited to say it in a way that is more like, you know, you you might want to consider, having a pap exam or something. I mean, but you put it in a way that's more
Yes.
invitational, or gosh, I've got this pain in my side. And that actually happened. Somebody I saw somebody who I it really looked like she was getting really, really bad pneumonia, because it looked like the back of her lungs were literally filling with liquid. And she was coughing. And I'm not going to say to her, you're getting pneumonia. I said, you know what? If I had that kind of cough, I just go get it checked out,
Mm, mm,
something like
mm.
that. Unless somebody says, are you picking up anything? And even then, I will say to people, this is my hunch. This is what I'm picking up.
Yeah.
But you need to check in and see if this resonates, because the damage can be done by taking inappropriate authority for your life.
Mm, mm,
I'm not the authority on your life.
mm.
And it's up to you to see, does this land or not? So, and actually we're kind of, and I love the idea of, we're both talking about these big predictions and how do we respond to them, and just noticing, does it resonate or not? You might just say, like when I heard the thing about San Francisco, it's like, that one, I didn't call all my friends. That one just didn't land for me. And I could have been wrong, because I'm a
Mm,
human being.
mm.
It couldn't happen. But also be aware that this isn't necessarily fate. And how do you respond to it? Do you leave? Do you stay? How do you hold it?